want to thank the gentlelady, recognize the gentleman from Ohio, Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to thank the ranking member as well for having this bipartisan hearing today. I think it's great to be in Oklahoma. We had a great time in West Virginia. I want to follow up on a couple of issues as it relates to energy, following on the questioning. But looking at Oklahoma, and I know that Chairman Lucas and Mr. Hearn have pointed this out as well in your testimony, but there were $64.9 billion in the state's gross domestic product that came from the oil and gas industry. $2.5 billion in taxes. 27% of Oklahoma's state's GDP comes from the oil and gas industry. 16.7% of the state is tied working to the oil and gas industry. The other thing that you mentioned briefly in your testimony, but I think it's important to note, that over $2 billion will return to property owners in terms of royalties. It's major. The other issue is that for every one oil and gas producing job in the state of Oklahoma and for the rest of the United States, there are roughly 2 other spinoff jobs. So why did I want to put out all those numbers? So while we were going through the testimony, I wanted to pull up the top oil and gas producing states. And they're not red states, they're not blue states, they're red, white, and blue states. Texas is number 1, New Mexico is number 2, North Dakota was number 3, Alaska was number 4, Oklahoma was number 5. And we saw what a big portion of Oklahoma's economy is derived from oil and gas production. Number 6 was Colorado. My dear friend across the aisle, you'll be surprised, California was actually number 7. Wyoming number 8, Utah number 9, Louisiana number 10, Kansas 11. My state of Ohio with the Utica Shale reserves, we're making the charts up to 12. And then, of course, following with Montana. What we have seen, of course, is that oil and gas spin-up jobs are domestic. They grow the economy. And I think in your testimony, you mentioned that there was, you had positions up to $100,000 that you just can't fill. The other thing I want to point out is part of oil and gas, I'm a firm believer if something's not grown, it's mined. And so if you look in terms of what does that mean for oil production, there's a lot of moly that goes into that. Barite goes into that. Phosphate mining goes for fertilizer. All of these, and they have an average income of about $85,000 for every one of those people that mines those products. So, saying all those things, one other thing I want to point out to my colleague here to the left mentioned the price going up. Some interesting numbers. In December of 2020, dollars per 1,000 cubic feet of natural gas. Listen to these numbers. December of 2020, $4.11. Today, or in December of just a couple months ago, $8.23. It's doubled. So we have a misguided energy policy, and I'm so glad that we're here talking about the things that are really affecting the American public. I'm going to ask you a question just real quick on the oil and gas side of things, if you don't mind. Because I like many of Mr. Hearn pointed out people that don't know a lot. I come from the energy production side of things, my private career. Can you explain, and I think you mentioned in your testimony, but you explain the percent depletion and how that relates to smaller oil and gas producers and why it's so important?
Yes, certainly. I'm not an accountant, I'm an engineer. However, we depend upon our participants who co-invest with us. They depend upon certain things, and we mentioned about the IDCs, which is the intangible drilling costs, but there's also a depletion allowance, and there's cost depletion up front, but there's also percentage depletion. So percentage depletion, which I think has been in question and has been on the crosshairs of some people. Percentage depletion, if you think about it this way, when you plant a crop one year, you can go back and replant it next year. But with our industry, what we pull out of the ground this year is gone. It's like you had a closet filled with some type of asset, and make them gold bars, and you were making bitcoins, right? You were pulling them out. They're not there once you pulled them out. So that's what the depletion allowance addressed.
You're constantly using your asset. You're depleting
You are
your
using
asset.
up your assets. At some point, it's gone. So the depletion allowance, I view it as it's not a handout. It's saying, hey, wait a minute, what you had to start with, you don't have anymore. So we're going to let you take the deduction for that. You're selling off an asset.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.